Today, I will once again share 3 photos with you. At first glance, these photos might seem harmless, but all of them harbor a disturbing backstory. But before we get into it, if you enjoy my narration of various mysterious and strange stories, then I would appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to the channel. With that being said, let's get into it. Evil adoption. At first glance, this looks like any ordinary family photo. The man in the center, wearing the yellow jacket, is John Edward Robinson. And the baby he is holding is Tiffany Stacy, a baby girl that had recently been adopted by John's brother. What no one knew at the time was that John had murdered the mother of 4-year-old Tiffany Stacy just one day before. He then kidnapped little Tiffany and just added the newborn baby of his murder victim to his own family. This was not the end of John's secret life as a serial killer, but it was definitely the pinnacle of evil. But let's take a look at how it could come to this point. John Robinson was born on December 27th, 1943, in Cicero, Illinois, the third of 5 children to Henry and Alberta Robinson, an abusive, alcoholic father and a strict disciplinarian mother. Throughout his entire childhood, he was known as a problem child, so it should come as no surprise that he ended up becoming a con man. The next 15 years he spent on permanent probation for countless embezzlement schemes. In 1977, he was named to the board of directors of a local charitable organization where he forged letters from its executive director to the mayor of Kansas City, naming him as the organization's Man of the Year. After this scam came to light, he was jailed for 60 days and afterwards created a number of shell companies. Around this time, he also began his killing spree. Robinson is known to be responsible for 8 homicides, but his total victim tally remains unknown. Kansas and Missouri police note that long stretches of Robinson's time remain unaccounted for. But let's talk about some of the victims we do know of. 1984. John hired a 19-year-old woman named Paula Godfrey as a sales representative for one of his shell companies. At some point, Robinson told her had arranged for her and a group of women to fly to San Antonio, Texas, to enroll in a clerical skills course. Robinson picked Godfrey up at her residence to drive her to the airport for her flight. After hearing nothing further from her, Godfrey's parents filed a missing persons report. Several days later, her parents received a typewritten letter with Godfrey's signature at the bottom, thanking Robinson for his help and asserting that she was okay and did not want to see her family. Since she was of legal age, police couldn't do anything, and her body was never found. Now that you understand his modus operandi, we can go back to this picture, because his next victim was Lisa Stacy, the mother of the baby, visible in this photo. He met Lisa Stacy and her 4-month-old daughter, Tiffany Stacy, at Hope House, a shelter for homeless women in Kansas City. Stacy told relatives that she was joining the Kansas City Outreach Program, an organization designed to assist young mothers. Posing as Mr. Osborne, he promised Stacy a job and a stable living situation in Chicago in exchange for signing several sheets of blank stationery. This would later become the base for adopting Tiffany Stacy after killing her mother. This fact is especially disturbing because it makes it clear that John specifically targeted the young single mother to rob her baby. Lisa and Tiffany checked into the Roadway Inn in Overland Park in early January 1985. Lisa told her relatives that Mr. Osborne arranged and paid for their new accommodations. On January 10th, Robinson arrived at Lisa's sister-in-law's house, where he picked up Lisa and little Tiffany. This was the last time Lisa Stacy was ever seen. A few days later, Robinson contacted his brother and sister-in-law, who had been unable to adopt a baby through traditional channels. John informs them that he knew of a baby whose mother had ended her own life, and left behind her baby daughter. The couple received Tiffany, renaming her Heather Tiffany Robinson. Afterwards, John forged a set of authentic appearing adoption papers with the forged signatures of 2 lawyers and a judge. He had successfully integrated the baby of one of his murder victims into his own family. Many serial killers keep keepsakes from their victims, but in my opinion, this is the most deranged case of this phenomenon. Over the next 15 years, John killed 6 more people. With the rise of the internet, we would contact women online using the username Slave Master. During all of this, Tiffany was growing up as part of the Robinson family and would even call him her Uncle John. He was arrested in June 2000 at his farm near La Cygne, Kansas, after a woman filed a sexual battery complaint against him, and another charged him with stealing her sex toys. As a result of John getting arrested, the whole story surrounding Tiffany unraveled, and both Heather herself and John's brother learned the disturbing truth. By the time Heather Robinson was a teenager, she had long known that she had been adopted as an infant and grew up knowing only her loving family in Illinois. One day, her entire worldview was shattered when she found out that her beloved Uncle John had murdered several women in Kansas, including her biological mother. In an interview, she said, "I remember my adoptive mother running up and down the stairs panicking. How could he do this to us? We're going to go to jail. This is horrible. Our lives are over." "That was the first time I ever saw my dad cry," she added. With the new charges, she also learned that she was being raised by the family of the man who was now accused of killing her biological mother, and that she was the missing baby. Although it is important to note that John's brother was not aware of this fact, and Heather didn't hate them after finding out the truth. On the contrary, she was later legally adopted by Don Robinson and his wife, and decided to keep the name they had given her. Don Robinson was later interviewed and shown the famous picture. He answered, "Every time I look at that picture, I'm thinking like, what's he thinking? Was it an hour before he killed your mom? Was it 4 hours before? Was it the day before? It couldn't have been very long. And there he is, grinning like a Cheshire cat for that picture." After John Robinson's arrest, she submitted her fingerprints and footprints to the FBI. The FBI gave her a DNA test that confirmed she was Lisa Stasi's missing child. Through this test, she also came into contact with her mother's side of the family. Today, she continues to search for her mother in hopes of eventually uncovering the whole truth of what happened that fateful evening. Dating game. Our next photo takes us to the eerie intersection of entertainment and true crime, capturing a moment when a serial killer brazenly appeared on national television, blending in with everyday life. This is the story of Rodney Alcala, infamously known as the dating game killer. In the image, Rodney Alcala appears as Bachelor Number 1 on the popular TV show The Dating Game in 1978. With his charismatic smile and confident demeanor, he easily captured the attention of both the Bachelorette and the audience. Describing himself as a successful photographer, he charmed everyone with tales of adventure and artistic passion. What the show's viewers couldn't see was the dark reality behind his genial facade. Alcala was a predator who had already begun a horrific spree of sexual assault and murder, and the woman next to him was supposed to be his next victim. A victim he was choosing on live television for the whole world to watch. Born in 1943, Rodney Alcala had a turbulent early life. In 1961, at the age of 17, Alcala joined the United States Army to become a paratrooper and served as a clerk. During his service, he was noted by his commanding officer as being manipulative, vindictive, and insubordinate. Alcala was also disciplined on several occasions for assaulting young women, an eerie foreshadowing of his later crimes. In 1964, after what was described as a nervous breakdown, Alcala was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, but he was also estimated to have an IQ of 135 by a military psychiatrist. Other diagnoses later proposed by various psychiatric experts at his trials included narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and malignant narcissism with psychopathy and sexual sadism comorbidities. He began committing serious offenses in the late 1960s. In 1968, his first victim was the 8-year-old Tali Shapiro. Shapiro was approached by Alcala on her way to school when he pulled up beside her in his car and asked if she needed a ride. Shapiro initially refused, but when she heard him say that he knew her parents, she got into his car. Alcala then took her to his apartment. When the police arrived, Shapiro was found alive, having been abused by Alcala. Miraculously, she survived, and Alcala fled the state. While on the run, he committed even more crimes, including his first murder. Cornelia Crilly, a 23-year-old Transworld Airlines flight attendant, was found sexually assaulted and murdered in her Manhattan apartment on June 12, 1971. Alcala had strangled her with her own nylon stockings. He was captured and eventually served a brief prison sentence, only to be released and continue his horrifying activities. After his release in 1977, he moved to Los Angeles and worked as a typesetter. During this time, he continued his killing spree, and 1 year later, he would have his famous appearance on television. His modus operandi often involved luring victims with the promise of professional photo shoots. He would then assault them, sometimes torturing them for hours, and finally kill them, often strangling or bludgeoning them to death. Following his capture, Alcala was subjected to a long and complex legal process. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death for the murder of Robin Samsoe. However, the conviction was overturned twice due to procedural issues and questions about the fairness of his trial. It wasn't until 2010, more than 3 decades after his arrest, that Alcala was once again convicted, this time also being charged with 4 additional murders. During his 2010 trial, Alcala disturbingly chose to represent himself. He showed no remorse, displaying a chilling nonchalance as he cross-examined witnesses, including members of his victims' families. The prosecution presented compelling evidence, including Alcala's own photos and DNA evidence, which linked him to the crimes. He was ultimately found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death. The photo of Alcala on the dating game is chilling, not only because it shows a man who had already committed horrific crimes, but also because it illustrates how he managed to hide his true nature. The woman who chose him on the show, Cheryl Bradshaw, later described feeling an unsettling vibe from him, and wisely decided not to go on the date. Her intuition likely saved her life. A day off. Our next set of photos captures a chilling juxtaposition between horror and normalcy. At first glance, these photos might seem mundane, depicting groups of people smiling, laughing, and enjoying moments of leisure. They resemble images of camp counselors on a pleasant retreat, perhaps enjoying a barbecue or a day by the lake. But the reality behind these seemingly innocent moments is far more sinister. The people in these photos were not ordinary workers or camp counselors. They were members of the SS, the Nazi paramilitary organization responsible for the administration and operation of Auschwitz. These men and women were directly involved in the systematic murder of millions of innocent people, primarily Jews, along with Romani people, political prisoners, and others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. After Germany initiated World War II by invading Poland in September 1939, the SS converted Auschwitz, an army barracks, into a prisoner of war camp. Various estimates indicate that the Auschwitz concentration camp SS garrison numbered 700 in 1941. As they relaxed and enjoyed their day off, just beyond the confines of their leisure, unimaginable atrocities were being committed. The contrast between these images of carefree enjoyment and the gruesome reality of their daily work is a stark reminder of the banality of evil. These individuals, who appear so ordinary in these photos, were part of a brutal machine of genocide, carrying out their horrific duties with a disturbing detachment. For the men, these duties involved torture, human experiments, forcing prisoners to work, or simply executing prisoners. A normal day looked like this. The SS men removed goods and corpses from the incoming trains, guided victims to the dressing rooms and gas chambers, removed their bodies afterwards, and took their jewelry, hair, dental work, and any precious metals from their teeth, all of which was sent to Germany. Once the bodies were stripped of anything valuable, the soldiers burned them in the crematoria. Since the SS was male-only organization, the women in this picture were no soldiers, but worked in administration. However, even if they didn't kill anyone, they spent their days coordinating forced labor, the transport of new prisoners, and finally scheduling the execution of innocent people. It's unsettling to think that many of them might have taken lives just days before or after these photos were snapped. Their smiles and relaxed postures suggest a disconnect from the horror they perpetuated, as if their horrific actions were just another job, easily left behind when the workday was over. They enjoyed camaraderie, food, and music, seemingly untroubled by the suffering they caused. These photos serve as a haunting reminder of the duality of human nature. They challenge us to confront the reality that ordinary people can commit extraordinary evil, and that such evil can be cloaked in the mundane and everyday. They force us to grapple with the uncomfortable truth that those capable of committing great atrocities can also be capable of great indifference, even pleasure, in their off hours.